right, so we're ready for our first Fireside Chat speaker. It is a great honor to introduce to you our first Fireside Chat speaker. He is a serial entrepreneur who has, I'm sure, many times pitched at events like this. He is also a co-founder of About.me and Sphere, which was acquired by AOL in 2008, as well as a partner at True Ventures. Please join me in welcoming Tony Conrad, who will be interviewed by Jitendra, Kavathekar, Managing Director at Accenture Open Innovation. Woo-woo!
This is great. Thanks, Denise. So we are going to have, was it an hour to get through? 45 minutes or so, an hour? We do want to open it up to questions as well, so as we go through our ruminations on stage, please think about what you might want to ask Tony through the next hour. Tony, you've got a tremendous background and resume. You've kind of been on the investing side with True, and you've had a number of entrepreneurial journeys and continue to do so. You got a great eclectic group of companies and domains that you participate in and contribute to. And everybody can read your About Me page, and you should, by the way. Great photography, great stories. But what's not on the resume? What is it that people don't know about you?
That's a good question. Coming at me right away.
Yeah.
I think part of the magic of when we started About.me is I realized the power of like taking ownership of your own journey and your own story. And so, I kind of took a step back and thought about a lot of things I've been involved with since I was a teenager. Even earlier, like my first job being mowing lawns for my neighbors. But I grew up in a very small farming community in Indiana. A pretty unglamorous spot, but quite a kind of an awesome spot, right? Because if you're a little bit energetic and you're bored, you can. There's no endless things that you can kind of go figure out to do. So, I was a basketball coach. I was a tennis camp counselor. I worked in a factory on a glue machine. I worked as a janitor at the local pharmacy. I did all kinds of weird stuff, right? And, when I think back about, all the things I've done, I think those things really are the formative, kind of moments in my life, and they're the foundation of what I hope I've been able to carry forward and bring with passion to each one of the startups I've been privileged to found or the investments I've been able to make it true. And so, yeah, there's all kinds of weird stuff like that.
Yeah, and look at your portfolio, look at the companies that you work with. It is a pretty eclectic group of companies. You got Blue Bottle, you got tech companies, you got all sorts of things. Does that craziness continue from your childhood until now? Is your mind active in many different paths, or is there a method to the madness when you start looking at where you want to play and what you want to do?
Well, I'm pretty active. I work out a lot. It's hard to believe I'm a little chubby, but I've done an Ironman. I've done, whatever. I'm busy. I'm a father of two young adults at this stage. I travel a lot. I work, I feel like, crazy amounts. Yes, I have a lot of energy, a little bit of probably ADHD sprinkled in, but as a strength. At True, I think the thing that my background has really served me well when I think about investing is that it allows me to kind of divorce myself from all the formality of, what's a big space and all that stuff that ultimately, it's not that it's not important, but it's not important to me, right? And I'm really comfortable with that, right? What I like is kind of uncharted territory, weird territory, open source ideas, things like that, and that's how you end up in a coffee company. Each one of these companies has a story and has a method to the madness, but it is a little helter-skelter, but it's worked well for me.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of stories, right? So when you come across an opportunity to potentially invest in or partner with, tell me what are the ingredients of the story that either you look for or you get touched by or you resonate with, or what are the essential ingredients? Tell me more about the story side of this thing.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So the thing that I over-index on is the story of the founder or founders. That's really what I care about. Kind of the why. Why are you doing this? Why does it need to happen? Why does it need to change? What's your view of this? That really, to me, is the most powerful part of any interaction I have with a potential investment. We'll use Blue Bottle as an example here. Excuse me. So Blue Bottle is a pretty atypical investment for us. We have about $2 billion under management at True. I would say 99.6% of our investments are in pure play technology companies, things ranging from SaaS to infrastructure to hardcore biotech to just all kinds of weird stuff. But Blue Bottle is definitely an outlier. And the way that we ended up getting there is I was just meeting with it on a personal basis. I like coffee. I'm really interested in the space. And I knew Blue Bottle was a magical brand that had been around the Bay Area for a while. And so I took a meeting with the founder, and what I was blown away with was that instantly, to me, he hit this criteria for me when I'm looking at a founder, and that is somebody who's a founder of a movement. And it's no different than a Matt Mullenweg when I first started talking with Matt when he was like 17 or 18, founder of Automatic WordPress, or John's conversations with James Park at Fitbit, or my conversations with Bree Pettis at MakerBot. They all have the same set of characteristics in that they have a view and a vision of how their product intersects with your life, and they're going to impose that on you, right? And they're going to impose it on you in a very elegant way because it's meaningful to them. And so coffee, what's meaningful about coffee? I knew it was an interesting business, but I didn't know it was such a important business. James's point of view is, listen, for most of us, there's a daily routine called coffee. Why shouldn't that be a beautiful, delicious experience? That's one of the first things that you do in your day. And this is the way he looks at the world, right? I'd never thought of it that way. But I was like, you're right. When you have something beautiful to start your day, that's a really good start to the day, right? And then I kind of went into so what's so special about what you're doing? Well, he had a point of view about sourcing organic beans when nobody else thought about that. He had a point of view about adhering to the strictest standards of sustainability when nobody, and still almost nobody, really adheres to that or understands it today. He had a point of view about freshness, that if the beans were more than 10 days old, you would throw them away. Think about that. Just throw them away, right? Because they don't meet his quality standard of what freshness is. He had a point of view on which cup you should drink your coffee drink in. If it's an espresso drink, it has to be consumed on premise because temperature is important in delivery of taste profile. So he went into this maniacal kind of crazy detail. And I remember at one point in time, I was like, I think he's crazy, but I think, as I kind of dug into it, I'm like, I think he's kind of right. And it's kind of magical. And so we ended up leading his round of investment. And today it's our largest investment at True. We have $22 million in Blue Bottle Coffee, right? And it's earned, they have earned that money from us, right? It's a privilege for us to be involved in that company. And it's a company that most likely will be a public market company soon. So that's what I'm looking for. If I use Bree Pettis as an example at MakerBot, Bree Pettis is not the founder of 3D printing, right? But he certainly became the face of 3D printing, right, for the consumer market. And it's because, once again, he had this understanding for himself around how that product was going to intersect with your life and why it was important.
We few years ago, quite a few years ago now, Yahoo wasn't doing that well back then. And Jerry had just come back as CEO, and we had Steve Jobs come in to give a little bit of inspiration of how he came back to Apple and how he looked at turning around Apple. And he had made this point that, they had just launched the iPhone at that point. iPhone was starting to take off. And he said he gets calls from, the CEOs of other mobile phone OEM companies, like Nokia's and the Motorola's of the world. And he said, "Hey, they asked me, Steve, your first product in a industry that you have no experience in, that we've been playing in for decades, and you kick our butts on this thing. How do you do that?" And to your point about the examples that you gave on Blue Bottle and Automatic, he said, "Because I care." Right? It's not that I care about the success of the thing. I care about what impact I'm going to have on people on this, right? And it's this caring part, and it's this, really getting into the essence of the why what you're doing matters to anybody else, and caring about the other person who you're selling this to, or you want to provide this value to.
I mean, it's the idea is just the surface, and a good idea is important, but ultimately it doesn't mean that much. Right? It's really about what's the drive behind the idea that matters. That's where the passion comes out, and that's where the nuances and the beauty and the simplicity and product, for everything from software to hardware to, any biotech stuff. You just see it. You can just see the founder translated into that simplicity. And obviously Steve Jobs, understood that and cared. But I think that is a great common characteristic.
Yeah, and so a couple of ways we can go on this conversation. I mean, I want to talk about the idea thing, but you just touched upon something that's kind of interesting before we go to the idea-driven approach. The sensitivity of and the kind of understanding of what this idea is and how, in a simple way, you can show why it matters is a pretty interesting thing that probably you can do with a lot of ideas. You could, it's probably a lot of ideas that actually probably are pretty meaningful, but they're just not delivered in the right way, or don't have the right, kind of approach to, or maybe the timing is not the right timing, who knows. And so the question is there a conditioning that entrepreneurs should go through in some life experiences, or some, we can talk about failures, we can talk about the vulnerability aspects, the kind of sensitivity to really simplifying why this matters, right? Or are the great entrepreneurs just born that way? Somehow it just hit them one day and they just kind of ran it from there.
I think that great entrepreneurs only work on stuff that matters to them, pure and simple. I'm sure there's examples out there of founders or entrepreneurs that have started very successful companies, and they've done it for the sport of it. But I don't know them. Right? I really don't. The ones that I know and have had the privilege to work with actually care. And it's something that they're personally passionate about. I think that's what separates an idea from a great idea, is what gives you the kind of the nuanced understanding of why it's important.
The nuanced understanding, yeah. Well, so let me take a little bit of a contrarian approach to the idea aspect, right? And this is a pet kind of peeve of mine also. But we go around and we're all in the culture together here. But so much of an emphasis put on, here's my idea. Let me pitch you my idea. There's so much of an emphasis on startup competitions and the celebration of, that was an amazing idea. Or I have a friend who has this great idea, you should invest in him. Or it's an idea first kind of approach to getting traction for the business that you're trying to create, the thing that you're trying to add value for. But ideas change. Your idea is going to change in 6 weeks, in 6 months, in a year. Hopefully your idea is going to change, unless you found it and you nailed it your first, first day of.
I don't think the idea changes, actually.
No,
not in the great companies. I don't really think the idea, the core idea, I think, is intact. The feature set and the presentation of that idea absolutely will evolve and change beyond pixels, right? In fundamental ways. But the core idea, WordPress democratizing, publishing, for everybody. I mean, that core idea holds true today. WordPress looks very different today than what it did, 10, 11, or 13 years ago when Matt was starting it.
So the adaptation of the idea, but the idea hasn't changed. What about Slack? Where would you put Slack in that?
Well, Slack is interesting because Stuart Butterfield, who is the co-founder with Katerina Fake, Flickr. Stuart started a game company, and the game company wasn't doing that well. And I can't remember how much he raised, but I was lucky I got to invest in it personally, and but the game company wasn't going anywhere, and he had about half his money left. I would say it's like $5 million, and he decided that there was this application that they'd built on top of IRC that just facilitated communication with the team, right, as they were building it. They had a fairly large team. And, I shouldn't be telling his story because it's his story. But I think what happened is essentially he anchored on that idea and felt that it was really meaningful because it was improving the productivity of his team. And he brought that idea to life. And, I invested in that, in Slack at that stage. And again, my company, About.me, I think we were one of the first 2 customers, of Slack. And I could see it. It was like, wow, somebody built this with a lot of care and attention.
You have a lot of folks, everybody here is from a country that they've went through this, stages of competitions to be at the top of their categories in their countries, and then they've come here for the World Cup challenge, and it's a special time because you kind of see representation of different countries and entrepreneurs that really have gone through that. We see entrepreneurs coming in from many countries every day, and they come here. They come here because there's a lot of funding, because there's an ecosystem, there's a lot of kind of helping hand to move it forward. There's a lot of mentorship available. There's a lot of practical reasons to be here. Will the world change where great entrepreneurs do not have to come to Silicon Valley?
It's
really
already changed. First of all, by the way, congratulations to those of you who have kind of advanced and gotten here. I suspect a lot of the stuff that I've been saying or we've been talking about it probably is boring to you because it's what you already do and already believe. So I'm probably not imparting any grand wisdom. But in terms of markets and international markets, I literally just got back from Montenegro yesterday, and I was in Stockholm and London last week. And, every market, right, is evolving, and it's evolving quickly because there's now success stories. The success stories back in the, Silicon SGI days, right, they were really centered here, but the success stories are in lots of different markets. And what's happening is, the Skype founders are now plowing money into the angel market in London, and soon we'll have Spotify and Daniel Ek and their team putting money into Stockholm, and already in Montenegro. I can see, as small of a country as that is, but for that region of Serbia, Croatia, and Montenegro and Albania, it's already amazing, right? There's some small little regional successes, and those people have dedicated their life to this vocation of entrepreneurship. And it is a way of life, right? Just in the way that you become a doctor or a lawyer or anything else, being an entrepreneur is a vocation. And people have a tendency when they're successful, they like the success, they like the notoriety that brings, but they also like their ability to impact change. So I do see it happening in each one of these markets. Maybe not as quickly as here. We have a perfect storm in the Valley in that when I go to the grocery store and I'm in the checkout line, the guy checking me out asks me if that's the new iPhone 6 or if I have the new iPad or whatever. I don't think those conversations happen in the community where I grew up, but people are very tech-centered here. But I do think the other markets it's happening.
I like Singapore quite a bit because it's such a...
Singapore is amazing.
It's amazing, and it's like Israel is the startup nation, the so-called startup nation, right? Singapore, it looks like the pilot nation. You can pilot your products really quickly there if you're a telco or if you're a retailer. Because you have a demographic that's willing to try new things. You've got a kind of a small place to rapidly try things, and it's a great place.
All you have to do is look at the conferences, right? Like Hong Kong. I'm here today because I didn't go to Hong Kong, but there was a conference there where there was 10,000 people. Right, but 10,000 people in the room, not 10,000 people kind of on the periphery, but 10,000 people in a little stadium, right, to talk about technology. And in Dublin, the Web Summit, which now is moving to Lisbon, same thing. I think there's 20-some thousand people, of which 5,000 to 6,000 are present in the room. Austin, Texas, I've spoken in front of groups of 4,000 or 5,000 people. Like this is big. That didn't exist 20 years ago. You maybe for a conference here or TED or something, but wow, you weren't seeing those in Helsinki, where there's the Slush conference, 10,000 people. I mean, that's it's amazing.
Ridiculous. I mean, it's not even
it's awesome. It's not ridiculous. It's awesome.
It's ridiculously great. I mean, no, but that's the point, right? It's so much part of whether you call it millennials, whether you call it kind of startup culture. There's such a great source of innovation, this human creativity that's applied to actually be able to do this.
Well, there's mentorship in person. There's mentorship in online, and there's the facility of mentorship, which was incredibly hard before the social web kind of materialized. It's now super simple, right? I find myself unbeknownst to me, like I'll end up realizing I'm having pretty deep dialogue with a number of founders that I probably will never meet in person, but I'm doing it and either through email because I've taken them out of my Twitter stream and they've got a question and I try to answer it, or I'll jump on the phone occasionally. I can't do it as much as I'd like, but occasionally I'll do that, and I realize I bet you Reid Hoffman's doing that, and I bet you Katarina Fake is doing it, and Stuart, and Eb Williams, and Matt Mullenweg, and I think we're all doing it.
I do want folks to ask questions. I mean, it's a great opportunity to ask Tony what's on your mind. There's mics on. There's one over there. I can't see if there's one over here. There's one over here. We'll have to peek over to see if we can find it. But please come up and ask a question. Yeah, just go up to one of these mics, and you can ask.
Tony, my name is Vince.
Hey,
We're all
Vince.
solving problems over here for humanity. My basic question is, how do you see a difference between a problem solving and innovation?
I think there's lots of innovation that's just fun. It's just occupying our time, and it's not bad, but I'm not sure what the problem it's solving. I'll give it a good example. Instagram, one of my favorite services, and Kevin Systrom, the founder of Instagram, actually, when he was a student at Stanford, interned on a part-time basis during the school year with one of my companies, Sphere, that I had started. I think Instagram's it's probably the app I use the most, but I'm not sure what problem it's solving in my life, right? So I think it's innovative, and it's cool interaction, and it's fun, but it's not solving a specific problem for me, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Thank goodness that Kevin did that and his team, because, I love it, but it's not really solving a specific problem. Oh.
Okay, so Tony, thanks for being here, first of all. And you were talking about mentoring people and doing it remotely. What kind of commitment do you expect from people you mentor online? Like, you get very little in return. So I'm guessing like the commitment and seeing somebody actually action on what you're saying is like really important. But what kind of commitment do you expect?
I expect zero commitment. It's not for me. I definitely don't. I think real mentorship is when you have a lot of follow up and you have repetition, right? And so I think for me to characterize it as mentorship is a bit of a falsity. But I do think giving advice and giving a nudge to an entrepreneur at the right moment. I've told many of entrepreneurs I thought they should stop on their idea, and it's a hard thing to hear, but the market's kind of spoken, right? There's no traction. They're not getting investment dollars. They're beating their head against it. They're getting increasingly frustrated. It's not that their idea is not a good idea. It's just not an idea for right now, or the circumstances aren't aligning themselves in a way that they should. So, giving advice is very different than mentorship, and you take my advice with a grain of salt, Sometimes it's pretty good, but it's based on a very thin interaction, and very thin level of data.
That's a good point, right? So, giving advice to someone that might be time to quit, or pivot, or change course. Maybe can you give an example of when you've had to do that, and how did you? It's a tough decision to make. I mean, you're so galvanized in a particular direction you're going. It's all going forward. When does that happen where you start to realize, I need to change, and versus having a local downer versus the ultimate, no, it should have changed, right? I mean, how do you,
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate, knock on wood. I haven't, had to quit on one of my ideas, but I've had lots of moments in my career and my life where I've thrown in the towel and just said, I'm over this. I need to chart a different direction. I think one of the biggest moments was earlier in my career where, I was working with a person I didn't entirely respect, and I thought they were a little ethically flawed, but we were part of a partnership. We were investing. I was getting a track record as doing well financially. It's very hard, right, to just say, it's incredibly hard to get a job as a venture capitalist. It is an incredibly hard job to get. And when you have it, it's easy to convince yourself that you should just hang in there for a little bit longer because, it'll all work itself out. And finally, one day I just said, I'm done with that, right? I'm not gonna do this anymore. And, that's what gave me the impetus to go out and start my own company. And that became successful. But as part of that experience of really going home and thinking about, okay, I've got like 16 months of savings, and I've got a couple kids, and I got a house, and I got a mortgage, and like, what did I just do? I remember being full on panicked. But I said, this is, okay, if you're going to do this, you're going to do it right. And the reason you did this is because you said that you only wanted to work with people that you were really excited to work with. And that was the commitment I made in that moment. And it's a commitment I've kept, not only in being a part of the True Ventures partnership, but also with each founder and founding team that I get involved with. I have to make that same kind of leap of faith that this is going to be a good experience, because they're not going to all be successful. There's a lot of them, not a lot of them, but some of them will the ideas just won't work, and that's okay. All right, you have to be really comfortable with failure and have to be really comfortable with risk. But what you cannot become comfortable or complacent with is sacrificing your own value system in terms of what's important to you. And what's important to me is the quality of the people that I work with, pure and simple. That is it. And that is like a guiding stick has really served me well. But there's been a few moments.
Yeah, no, thanks for saying that. Yeah, it is about the people. Go ahead.
Hi, Tony and Jitendra. My name's Eddie, Nano4 Molecules for Life, and I'm not an entrepreneur, and I don't have a legal background. I'm not interested or passionate about those things. I'm a scientist, and what I'm going to ask you is, how do people in the science community hook up with people that do have a passion for these things, and finding people that are not maybe just out to make a quick buck, but have a sense of ethics and social responsibility, want to change the world, in addition to creating income? How do we hook up?
Yeah, it's always tricky. There's a ton of people, who have become successful technology founders or entrepreneurs, who really don't know much about technology, right? But they've spent their career in building out carefully networks. They've gotten to know people. They're good thinkers. They understand how to insert themselves into the product. Kind of vision, leadership. They bring lots of different skills to the table. The Valley, when I first got involved with technology, one of my basic, kind of premises for doing so was I looked at the Valley and I thought, the Valley's littered with a ton of great pieces of technology, right? The Valley floor is there's a lot of great technology companies that are dead, right? And it's not because the technology wasn't beautiful or the code wasn't beautiful. It's because they didn't have any idea of how to bring it to market, right? And how to breathe life into it and to give it a story and to give it meaning and to impose that vision of why it's important to everybody else. And I think that's what you're looking for. You're looking to partner with those kind of people that can use that skill set or whatever unique skill set you might have to bring to the table. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I don't think you can look for a silver bullet. This stuff takes time. And if you really want to be an entrepreneur, you really want to be a founder, you know, I don't care if you have 7 kids, you have a husband at home, you have a wife at home, you have an ailing father, it doesn't matter. If you're not out a minimum of 3 to 4 nights a week in the circles of what's happening in a community like San Francisco or the Bay Area, then you're not serious. And you should really ask yourself that, right? I mean, it's that fundamental, right? There's so much more to the job than building or writing amazing code. You know, it's important, but it's only a piece of the puzzle, right? The rest of the puzzle happens when you get out and you actually build a community that you can surf off of and surf with. And I don't mean physically surfing, but I mean, you get the idea, be in the flow with. When I started being an entrepreneur, you know, some of the people that, you know, I consider friends today, you know, some of my close friends, Evan Williams, you know, from Twitter and now Medium, and Dick Costello and Katarina Fake and Stuart Butterfield and, you know, Slack and Flickr and, you know, Twitter. And like we were all part of that circle together, right? And, you know, I don't think any of us, except for maybe Stuart, actually really have deep technical skills in that group.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. You know, I mean, the scientist marrying up with an entrepreneur, or scientist also being an entrepreneur, I mean, whichever way it ends up going, it sometimes feels like oil and water, but I don't know if it needs, I don't know if it has to feel like oil and water, right? I mean, but there is different energies here that you go through, and something as hard as technology transfer out of public funded labs into the private sector is really, there's a lot of challenges in that. But just on the micro level, just on a personal level, you mentioned something that, you know, you don't want to connect with folks that are trying to make a quick buck.
Yes.
So many great founders don't want to make a quick buck. That's not, you know, so kind of having a discernment of the types of, you know, partners that you want to have, or types of investors you want to have. And everybody has their game that they play. Everybody has what they've been successful with. But having that appreciation of that, I think, is really important, because not all black and white. It's not, you know, they're not all bad guys. They're not all good guys. I mean, you know, it's a matching process. And the other thing I would say is you know, when I was an engineer way back when, you know, I built out things that only 10% of what I built out was really what was appreciated by the business types to take it to market, right? I mean, I had this whole kind of framework of how it's all going to be perfect. But sometimes the value is in small doses, you know, to actually take it to the market. And so when you talk about science, you know, I don't know how to rationalize that, but there's a bit of maybe the whole enchilada doesn't have to actually get out there. Maybe there's aspects of it or something. I don't know. I'm not saying it well, but maybe you understand what I'm saying. But a good question.
Any place you suggest where to go? Where do you find these entrepreneurs and people that
Are you here in the Bay Area, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Ask around.
Just. I mean, I know a lot of scientists, but I don't know a lot of entrepreneurs.
Well, I mean, I'm sure just in this room, there's somebody else who is interested in science, and find them, or, you know, find him afterwards and tell him what you do. Like, tell him the one event you go to, and when you go to that event, you know, don't try to meet 53 people, and don't try to meet the star in the room, you know, but find real people and ask them what they're going to next. Okay. And just start that way. It'll work itself out. You'll see.
Okay, great.
I promise.
Thank you very much.
And a lot of times people are interested to know, what exactly are you talking about? Like, which area of science? What?
Molecular biology, synthetic biology,
Okay.
and antiviral, so virology.
Okay. That probably, you know, probably lighted up 2 or 3 people in the room that probably want to talk to you.
Okay.
Right?
I'll volunteer there.
Great. Is there no? Okay, good. I have a question for you, Tony.
Yeah.
Tell me if you agree that we should encourage this, or whether you think that we should be not encouraging it. Do you know Hyperloop? You know Bebop with Hyperloop? He's the CEO of Hyperloop. Anyway, so I asked them this question. So you got Uber, you got Airbnb, Hyperloop is coming at some point. And there's a great innovation, a great thing that's going to come to the market, and then hopefully people will use it, and hopefully it'll make lives happier in whatever way the entrepreneur wanted to do that. But there's also a side effect of that, and there's a displacement of jobs, there's a change in society that society has to digest and work through. And maybe in previous years and earlier years of these technologies coming in, it took a while for that echo effect to hit, and maybe there was a delay of when that would happen. But nowadays, it immediately happens. When things take off, you see the side effects. So Uber is a great example. Is it the responsibility? Should it be the responsibility?
Uber's a great example. I was in London, and and the Uber driver who talks about Uber as though he's an employee, right? Yeah. So with tremendous pride, says to me, "We have 51,000 drivers." Right? Yeah. Now, I'm an investor, indirectly into Uber in the first round that they raised, but so I'm a little bit biased. But it struck me as like, wow, I get it. Now I understand why a government, some governments have succeeded in taking Uber down and taking this kind of shared, personal economy down, Airbnb and whatnot. But I don't think they succeed for long because it just generates so many jobs in a new and unique way. Yeah. Not in a way that registers as, I'm employed, right, by a company, but I'm very much employed. It's amazing. 51,000 jobs. Yeah. I tell you, the mayor of London is not going to ban. Oh, I shouldn't say that, but I doubt that the mayor of London would be banning, something like Uber or Lyft. It's just too important now to their economy.
It's too important. And last year, it's more important now than it was last year. But even last year was pretty important.
Well, it's too important not just to the economy, but to the humanness. What is it where is it we want to live? What is it we want to do? Yeah. 76%. So we made a bunch of changes on About.me. If you don't have a page, I hope you'll go create one. And if you have one, I hope you'll go back in and give it a second try or kick it around a little bit. We have millions and millions and millions of people on the platform, and we decided to make a big change in really stripping down the product into its bare essence and asking people to put one spotlight on their page, which would create utility for them. And the reason we did that is because we look around the market, and 1 in 3 workers in the Bay Area and New York City right now, 1 in 3 workers, 33%, are freelancers, right? They work for themselves. And that number nationwide in the next 3.5 years, not like 10 years, will go to 40% nationwide. And when you go out and you talk to college students, 76% of them today tell you that they will have a secondary source of income that will be anchored around one of their passion projects or one of their hobbies. 76%. Right? So I get it. I do. I'm wondering how society, as a proud participant in humanity, I wonder how society is going to navigate the utter kind of destruction of the job infrastructure or foundation that we've grown accustomed to kind of going forward. But I'm also super positive on how that's going to unfold and what it's going to unleash in terms of innovation, because I think we're going to move down to micro innovation, right, in a really powerful way. As a guy, this, you have like 4 different shirts we can choose from, It'd be great if there's like 10 more designers, you know what I mean? Or like we get some, I don't know, bracelets or something. But like that's the innovation that comes out of a self-empowered.
Yeah, and maybe you answered my question I was going to ask, which is, is it a responsibility of the entrepreneur as they come to market and as they're seeing traction of their idea that's disruptive, to think about the side effects and grease the skids for society to digest those side effects? Would it have been a good thing for Uber to think about how do you help the medallion drivers through this transition? What's the model? Is there an economic model that would make sense for them also? Or would that be a burden that they should not be carrying really? and the ecosystem will find a way to bridge that need and trust the process, right? How much of, the kind of take on the benefit corporation type of mindset, right? You're going to make money, but you also want to do good in the world.
I won't speak on behalf
what's
of
your personal
Uber.
opinion?
I don't think Travis would be happy about that, right? And I have no, I have no ability to do so.
okay, not Uber, sorry.
But I think, it's a handful of companies that have that responsibility. Really, honestly, it's Apple and Google and Microsoft and a handful of other companies that really you're talking about. I don't think you're talking about .me or even Medium or WordPress at this stage. I think, I don't know. I don't know how to even begin to answer that question.
Yeah, I know, it's a complex question. I think there's something there, but it's an interesting one. We got 1 minute. I got the 1 minute sign. Thank you. Do we have another question? I can't see it around the corner. Who wants to take the last question? Oh, another
Here
question.
we go.
Last question.
Future
Go for
of
it.
design with technology. What's the future of design, or what's the future of technology with design or without design? What do you see that?
The future of design. It's funny. I just did an interview on Monocle in London on Monday of last week or Wednesday of last week, and I was with Jeff Veen, who's one of our partners at True and one of the kind of legends of Silicon Valley design. I don't think I can answer the question as eloquently as he can, but what I can make a plug for is for you to go to Monocle and put my name in, and you'll get one of the 2 interviews that they've done. And it's a podcast which really focuses in on design. But design's just like table stakes. Design is not just about product; it's about the entire experience, from what the company looks like, how it acts, what our social responsibility is. Design impacts a lot of different things, but we get into it in the podcast. Listen, thank you very, very much for having us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony. This is great to have you. Thank you.